In recent days, big news organizations have been coming forward with a slew of reports about one senator, John Fetterman. The media ran all these new allegations about his mental health based on claims from one named former staffer and a bunch of anonymous people. This triggered a debate about hit pieces and the media going after Fetterman for daring to take stances that the far left doesn't like. Soon, journalists were weighing in on both sides, with some saying it's so obvious that these news agencies are on the attack and want to get him kicked out of Congress, and others saying, no, this is important journalism. Learn a lesson from Biden. I have pieced through the story that started all of this, and I have followed the fallout. I can tell you, this is about so much more than one guy. This is about journalism and the current state of news. And it's about things no one is talking about. This situation is filled with issues the American public should understand about the media. Things like anonymous sourcing, coverage of health and mental health in particular, how allegations about mental health can possibly be, and this is an important quote, thoroughly vetted. It's also about how the media loses sight of relevance and the whole point of even doing stories. It's about how journalists bury lines that are crucial for context and fairness. It's about how the media is set up so that one political operative can start a firestorm. And so much more than that. I have read the initial story about this 4 times, and each time I'm surprised by new parts of what they did journalistically. I'll also tell you about how this gave Fox News and other right-wing outlets fodder, and how Democrats are among the ones slamming this reporting. Plus, the importance of destigmatizing mental health issues. The brain is an organ. When I reached out to the news agency that started all this, I ended up asking them like 10 different questions. I also reached out to Walter Reed Hospital. You'll hear why. This is also about a journalistic phenomenon, hit pieces. What makes something a hit piece? How do you decide if something is a hit piece? I'll take you through what I found and a look at how this happens inside newsrooms. Man, this story is like a thick stew full of meaty stuff for us to dig into. So let's do that. Soup's on! Does that work with my stew image? Whatever. It's coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. I'm Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. I look forward to this every week, folks. It's so great to be connecting with you this way. For those of you who don't know, if you're new to this show, I spent 20 years inside mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN, where I became lead on-air fact-checker. And throughout all that time, I saw these huge systemic problems inside big mainstream media and how those problems are hurting our entire society. In order to have a functioning democracy, we need a media that does its job. And in this era, when disinformation and misinformation are everywhere, we desperately need trustworthy sources of truth. Truth requires 2 things, facts plus context. I hear so much great feedback from you all, so thank you so much. With each episode, I put out a newsletter that's filled with links and more information than I can fit in here. It's free. You'll find it on something called Substack. It's called They Stand Corrected, or just check out the show notes or my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. Paid subscribers get additional content, including what I've been doing now, some hyperlinked transcripts from episodes. I'm getting amazing feedback on that. Thank you. Sometimes the feedback comes in the form of audio messages. And here's a nice one. I got this from a high school student who has been doing columns for a bunch of big news sites.
Hi Josh, my name is Gregory Lykov. I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for your wonderful show, They Stand Corrected. As someone who is surrounded by media all day, having an individual take the time to expose the outright bias and lack of credibility in media today is just wonderful to see. Keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring the younger generation, like people like me, to continue pursuing media. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gregory. By the way, he told me he's part of a group called Time to Stand Up for Israel. Good for him. I have also been getting great responses to recent columns that I've been doing for The Contrarian that are also in my newsletter. Let's see some of the latest. Clemens writes, Thank you, Josh. You are truly doing the founders' work as they no longer can. Huh. Thank you. Marie writes, my 30-something nephew mentioned you the other day, then voila, here you appear in my feed. Job well done. It must have meant something that our stars collide. Thank you, Marie, and tell your nephew that I say thank you. All right, let's dig into this. I was alerted to this as soon as it happened. A listener who is a longtime professional journalist messaged me and said, you need to see this. He saw this story about Senator John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania. And because this listener and I have spent so long inside big mainstream media, we knew right away that other big news organizations would jump on this. And of course, they did. The listener said it was a smear campaign designed to go after Fetterman. And this listener is not alone. Soon, some fellow Democrats and Republicans were talking about hit pieces and what was really driving them. I'm going to start with this recap for you. The story that started all this was published by New York Magazine. It was long. It was more than 7,000 words. Now, Senator Fetterman represents a state, and the people in that state should know as much as possible about their senator's fitness to serve. A senator also makes decisions that affect the whole country, and the country deserves to know about that person's fitness to serve. But I kept reading this story, and there is nothing in it that even suggests that Fetterman is doing anything to have a negative effect on the people of his state or the country. I want to just let that sink in for a second. I have read this over and over, and I can tell you there's nothing in it suggesting that he's doing any damage to the country or the people he's there to represent. The background here is important. John Fetterman had a stroke a few years ago and has openly talked about depression. The people of Pennsylvania elected him over Mehmet Oz, so the people of Pennsylvania knew about his history. In office, Fetterman has angered far-left progressives for a few reasons. A big one, he recognizes Israel's right to defend itself and dismantle Hamas after the terrorist massacres of October 7th, 2023, which were the most evil terrorist massacres of modern times, per capita way, way bigger than 9/11, and included even more horrific things, like things you don't even see represented in horror films. Radicalized people on the far left think Israel should have not fought back or stopped fighting back really fast, which would have allowed Hamas to regroup, recover, and carry out more atrocities, which is exactly what it said it would do. People on the far left are angry at him for his position on that. Plus, he met with Trump after Trump won, and he has been willing to work with Republicans on some things, which to some people is just so unacceptable. All this is crucial background for this coverage of John Fetterman. This New York Magazine piece is based on complaints from one named former staffer and a bunch of anonymous people identified as current or former staffers. They say they're concerned about his mental health. Here are a few lines from this piece. Quote, former and current staffers paint a picture of an erratic senator who has become almost impossible to work for and whose mental health situation is more serious and complicated than previously reported. All right, so right there, it's like, oh, okay, maybe we need to know about this. The next sentence says this. No one is saying every controversial position stems from his mental health, but it's become harder for them to tell which ones do. Well, who says any of them do? If you look at his positions, there's no sign of any big changes. There's no evidence that he is taking any votes or positions because of any kind of mental health problems or any kind of disconnection from reality. There's nothing. And the political positioning of at least some, if not all, of these sources is also clear. Quote, early on in the conflict, 16 of his former campaign staffers wrote a letter anonymously saying they found his full-throated support for Israel to be a gutting betrayal. So we've got people in the far left part of the Democratic establishment who somehow think it's a betrayal to stand by the only democracy in MENA, the Middle East and North Africa. These folks are part of the progressive movement that pushes hatred against Israel and does not want it fighting back and does nothing about mass deaths and killings around the world, like hundreds of thousands of people killed in Ethiopia, Yemen, Syria, nothing. If you're new to this show and your thought is, wait, but we give Israel money, then listen to previous episodes in which I have fact-checked that. I've talked about top recipients of U.S. money. One is Ethiopia. Another one is Jordan, which is refusing to follow an extradition treaty. It is harboring one of the most wanted terrorists by the United States. People don't bother to look at this stuff. They don't want to know. There's no proportional coverage or anger or anything based on Israel getting financial support from the United States. All of that is necessary to understand this piece. Buried way down near the end of this New York Magazine piece is this quote from the journalist. In my conversation with Fetterman, I didn't find any indication that the stroke had left him cognitively impaired. What the hell is that doing down near the bottom of the story? Just purely journalistically, I don't care who you're writing about. If I'm told that someone is cognitively impaired and having all these problems, and then I interview the person and there's no sign of it, that goes in one of the first paragraphs. It could be about Trump, about anyone. In my interview, I saw no sign of cognitive impairment. That is so far down in a paywalled story. How many people even read that far? And there's more. This quote about a fellow lawmaker was buried. When she was asked if she has observed Fetterman struggling, she said, quote, not at all. Now, on top of all this, there's also private stuff about his wife allegedly being upset about his position on Israel and some other stuff and being concerned about him. Who reports on inside details of a lawmaker's marriage and disagreements? But then, also buried far down, is this. His wife says in a statement that the former staffer who is named throughout this piece, okay, she is now accusing that former staffer of having given her what she's calling scary, untrue stories about his health. And she said doctors told her that their concerns were not with her husband, but with that former staffer. This story is a mess. It's a journalistic mess. And somehow it gets even worse. The guy I've been talking about here, this one named former staffer, he is Adam Gentleson. In this story, Fetterman says that this guy, Adam Gentleson, took action that jeopardized the privacy/sanctity of my confidential medical records. I subsequently directed my doctors to sever any access Adam could have to my medical information. I will tell you, there's one very serious incident discussed in here when Fetterman allegedly fell asleep at the wheel after a flight and had an accident. While that is serious, it also happens and doesn't have to have anything to do with health or mental health or anything else. All right, let me see if I can sum this up for you. This one long story is based on one named former staffer who has admitted political disputes with Fetterman. And it's based on unnamed folks who apparently say the same thing, and it has no proof of anything and no sign that his alleged struggles are hurting the country or his state. Nevertheless, other media, of course, jumped right on it. The New York Times, Axios, a bunch of places. Here's a report from CNN.
Fetterman is no longer following that strict medical regimen that was outlined by his doctors and is demonstrating erratic and reckless behavior, according to his former chief of staff, Adam Gentleson, who went public in that New York Magazine report. I asked Fetterman about that and about whether he is indeed following that protocol and whether he can actually fill out his term, which ends at the end of 2028.
My reaction is it's a one source hit piece, and it involved maybe 2 or 3 anonymous disgruntled staffers saying just absolute false things.
People in the media have been weighing in on this. At The Atlantic, writer Jonathan Chait tried to argue that this is a really important story. He wrote, quote, conservatives are now doing the exact same thing that the Biden defenders did, denying the obvious unfitness of a politician because he's politically useful. Remember, before opinions, we need to look at facts. Facts first, always. It isn't obvious that Fetterman is unfit to serve. That is a question. And this guy's piece in The Atlantic also includes unfair summaries. Like he wrote that New York Magazine reported that, quote, Fetterman's staff and even his wife have repeatedly expressed concerns over his mental health, following a pattern of strange statements and actions from the senator, including a near-fatal car crash. This piece in The Atlantic does not mention that his wife gave that statement on the record, raising serious questions about the report, and that there's no proof that his falling asleep at the wheel in that instance was related to his mental health. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal ran this take from writer James Kirchick.
Mr. Fetterman does indeed suffer from a debilitating illness, sudden onset political moderation. The first indication appeared in October 2023, when he repudiated demands that Israel desist from responding militarily to the largest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. We must support Israel in efforts to eliminate the Hamas terrorists who slaughtered innocent men, women, and children. Mr. Fetterman tweeted 11 days after the group's barbaric assault that left some 1,200 people dead and 250 in captivity.
A bunch of sites, particularly right-wing sites, have pointed out that the same news agencies that defended Fetterman and his ability to serve during his election in 2022 are turning on him now that he has shown himself to not march in line with all things progressive. Fox had a field day with it.
It looks like the far left is fed up with their one-time golden boy, John Fetterman. The liberal media is now coordinating attacks to take down the Pennsylvania Democrat.
They played this remark, which was very trademark John Fetterman, plain spoken, not into the traditional ways of presenting yourself in Washington.
It's like in the Goodfellas, everyone takes a beating sometime. It was just a dumb hit piece, and we've all moved on.
But the New York Times ran with it and dropped this little nugget saying his volatile and concerning behavior has coincided with a period when his politics have become more conservative. Now the smear campaign is fully underway.
So, what does the named former staffer, this guy Adam Gentleson, say about the firestorm he triggered? What does New York Magazine and its parent company say? Who is the prominent Democratic lawmaker going after the media on this? And how do you decide when something is a hit piece? All that and more coming up.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Josh Levs.
We are blessed to be able to have a speaker this evening who speaks with a lot of heart.
An outstanding author, a principled and groundbreaking journalist, a really engaging speaker and thinker.
Broadcaster, journalist, and host of They Stand Corrected, the podcast fact-checking the news. Thank goodness.
Josh spent 20 years reporting for NPR and CNN, where he developed unique expertise on nonpartisan fact-checking. He has been called Truth Seeker in Chief.
Josh has won multiple Peabody Awards, Murrow Awards,
and awards from the AP, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and more.
His book, All In, was published by HarperCollins and won the Nautilus Gold Award for promoting positive social change. He has spoken to the United Nations, Congress, Google.
And of course, I think is very cool, won a debate at Oxford.
He launched his podcast and newsletter called They Stand Corrected to provide listeners with the truth in a world of disinformation.
Clearly, he is a much-needed voice during these crazy times.
It's my pleasure to introduce Josh Levs to you today.
Please welcome.
Please join me in welcoming Josh Levs.
I love getting out there and meeting people like you. It's such a great opportunity to answer your questions and discover more about listeners to this show and potential listeners too. If you're interested in working out something in person or online, there's a form at my website, joshlevs.com. That's JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. Just click bookings. Senator John Fetterman has been asking a question about this coverage. He did so in the New York Magazine report that started this avalanche, and he said similar things in other interviews. Why is this a story? That's a great question. Having read the coverage, I can tell you it's not clear why. Before the break, I played you someone arguing that it's like Biden, but it isn't. Biden was president. He had the nuclear codes. He ran the executive branch. There were legitimate questions about whether he could fulfill his duties as president. With John Fetterman, first, the stakes are different. Do the people of Pennsylvania believe he is unfit to serve? Has he taken any actions that anyone can look at and concretely say were signs of poor mental health and have done damage to his state or the country? No one has anything here to point to. And he does not have the nuclear codes. He cannot start a war. He isn't running the executive branch. And look, there are lawmakers who believe all kinds of lies, like Marjorie Taylor Greene on the far right and Rashida Tlaib on the far left. I still wouldn't claim to have any sign that their mental health should be the reason that they should be kicked out of Congress. Does Fetterman believe lies that are affecting anything he does? Is he out of touch with reality? There's no there there. If there is, I want to see it. Democratic Representative Richie Torres of New York had a great statement about this. He said, quote, "I know a hit piece when I see one. The only reason for the coordinated campaign against Senator John Fetterman is his unapologetic pro-Israel politics. Let's call it what it is. As someone who has struggled with depression my whole adult life, I can tell you that if you truly care about someone's mental health, leaking hit pieces against them is a strange way of showing it." That brings me to coverage of mental health. As part of my work for gender equality and issues facing dads over many years, I have reported on mental health and stigmatization of mental health, and I've pieced through tons of studies. The brain is an organ. We need to destigmatize mental health. It's like any other form of health. In statements, this former staffer, Adam Gentleson, keeps saying that he's worried about Fetterman and wants him to get help. But Richie Torres is right. Leaking stuff to damage someone politically obviously does not help them with their mental health. So the argument that this is about helping him, that's off the table. But if your goal is to get someone kicked out of Congress because you want someone who will vote a different way, then you do something like this. Adam Gentleson is a political operative who has been at it for years. He knows how things work. That brings us to journalistic questions that I've asked New York Magazine. I asked them about their rules for anonymous sourcing. This is a big issue for the media in general, and I want to help you understand it. Anonymous sourcing should be very rare. It should only happen when someone has a very good reason that they need to remain anonymous and definitely have this information. And you can explain to your audience what their reason for remaining anonymous is. You should also make sure that you could not possibly get the information any other way. To be clear, I'm talking about anonymous sourcing. So when I tell you that a listener told me about something, like who first alerted me to this, that's not sourcing, really. This person just sent me the stuff, and I look at it myself, and I'm reporting on it. I'm not counting anonymously on him or anyone to tell me what this stuff says. This is about alleged information, quotes, positions, arguments that people make anonymously through the media. I want to know what the rules are over at New York Magazine. This article does not give reasons for why people demanded anonymity, including former staffers, not just current ones who you can say obviously don't want to get fired. So I looked for what New York Magazine's rules are about this stuff. They are owned by Vox Media. When you hear the word Vox, you might think of Vox.com, a news site. Vox Media, the corporation, owns a bunch of things. Sites like The Verge, The Cut, Thrillist, a podcast called The Pivot, and more. I found their statement about anonymous sourcing. It's very brief. It only says that they allow anonymity, quote, when we know our sources to be credible and reliable and that their story would otherwise not be told. We make best efforts to confirm the veracity of the information provided by anonymous sources and will not include any information we have not thoroughly vetted. I have so many questions about this. How can Vox Media know that all of these anonymous people who went after Fetterman here are credible and reliable, especially given their political positions? How can you know that their story would otherwise not be told? How can you thoroughly vet information about someone's mental health? Like, literally, how is that possible? Aside from the person and their medical caregivers, how do you vet that? What steps did they take here in keeping with their own rules? I emailed Vox Media with a bunch of questions like this, and I have not heard back. I have also emailed Walter Reed Hospital because this New York Magazine story includes, quote, directly from a doctor who treated Fetterman 2 years ago. This was back when Fetterman had an episode in which he experienced problems and was apparently at the time experiencing delusions. The New York Magazine report says the doctor told the reporter that the main causes at the time were lingering effects of his stroke, dehydration, depression, and also the original medication for depression might have been a factor. There's nothing concrete to make anyone believe that any of these problems exist right now. So somehow the reporter got something from a doctor about something that happened 2 years ago with Fetterman. How did that happen? I have asked Walter Reed. It's possible that Fetterman gave permission for the doctor to share certain information. I've asked Fetterman's office about that. I'll let you know if I hear back. Either way, that was 2 years ago. It does not explain the firestorm now. I want Fetterman to be healthy also. If he is in some kind of danger, then get him help in ways that actually work. But this is all about a political attack. That brings me to the whole concept of a hit piece. I've talked to you in the past about how we need to have definitions of terms in our society so that we're not creating a Tower of Babel scenario. There isn't a single definition of what a hit piece is, and so there is subjectivity there. I can tell you that given everything I have seen here, it absolutely fits that bill. Either way, how do hit pieces happen? Some people believe that it's a conscious move, even something that people behind the scenes in newsrooms admit they are doing. And that has happened. I went looking into the history of this for you. I found some really interesting remarks on C-SPAN from the late 90s. This was a writer at Slate at the time, William Salatan. Here are a few clips of what he said.
When you go out to report the story, your editor may have told you for any number of reasons what line you're supposed to come up with, what you're supposed to prove. And that agenda can be driven by politics, and so you're going to reach your conclusion, the facts be damned. It can also be driven by, your editor says, let's go out and do a hit piece on so-and-so.
That can happen, and it's sometimes done by the same people complaining about this one. Fox and other right-wing organizations have done hit pieces on Democrats and made no secret of it. But in my experience, it usually happens a different way. That's coming up. Which of these three pieces of music do you find most inspirational? Here's choice A. Here's B. And not to influence your selection, but I think my personal favorite, C. Here's how you vote. Go into whatever app you're using to listen to this podcast and be sure to click the subscribe button and rate the show. Give it 5 stars. And if it has a review section, then review it. That is the way that you show these platforms that they should be recommending this show to other people. If you use Spotify, you'll see how to give it 5 stars. And if you use Apple, you can do 5 stars and type in a review. So while I play you this music, just pull up that section of the app and type in something awesome about this show so people know. Okay, ready? Go. Hopefully most of you are fiddling with your phones now. Obviously, if you're driving, have somebody else in the car do it. Or decide that before you get out of the car, after you park, you'll take care of it then. Here's a few more seconds for those of you to do what you're doing. To everyone who has given the show a great review, thank you so much. Here's what you do. Send a note to this show and let me know which of these pieces of music was your favorite. A, B, or C. I'll use that in a future episode. After all, the whole point of inspirational music is to inspire you to go do something awesome, right? Well, hopefully you just did. For a moment there, you have been a hero to this show. Thank you. As I'm recording this episode, I did hear back from Walter Reed Hospital saying what I expected, that they cannot give away medical information. So maybe Fetterman's office allowed this reporter at some point to get some quotes from a doctor. I'll update you in the future if I hear. As for how hit pieces can happen in general, I have not had the experience of an editor specifically saying, let's go do a hit piece on so-and-so. It's generally more stealthy than that. People tell themselves that they're going to go wherever the facts lead, but then they go talk to critics and don't fact check what critics say. So they end up getting a negative story if that's what they were searching for in the first place. As always, I would love to hear from you. Paid subscribers, contact me through the newsletter. You'll see you can message me right there or right in the comments. And everyone can use a form at my website, joshlevs.com, JOSHLEVS.com. A quick planning note, next week's episode is going to be out early. It's about Memorial Day, and I'm planning to have it out in time for Memorial Day here in the United States, which is Monday, so check for it in your feeds then. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week. Before you go, one quick idea. Think of someone you know who might be particularly interested in this episode. Click the share button and send this episode to that person, saying, I really think you should listen to this episode. In this era, in which people are so overwhelmed with content from the moment they get up to the moment they go to sleep, getting a note from someone they know saying, I think you specifically would find this interesting, that is often the most impactful thing to help people discover this show. Thank you.